Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. Back in 2005, Sony fans got to see the birth of one of their favourite characters, Kratos.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
Mr. Worldwide!
The original God of War went on to be an absolute juggernaut that many games would try to replicate. One game that has had that accusation thrown at it is a little game by the name of Spartan Total Warrior.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Developed by Creative Assembly, known for the Total War games, Spartan Total Warrior is the first spin-off of the Total War franchise. Published in late 2005 by Sega, the game went on to have relatively okay reviews. What is interesting though is the game was only announced to the public on March 8th of 2005, only 2 weeks before the first God of War dropped, which would explain why people thought this game was a clone. Although I wasn't able to find anything to do with the game's development, odds are it was in development for quite a while, at least a few years. And the reason I say this is because the game has a pretty expansive story and setting. The story follows our unnamed Spartan known as the Spartan, aka Spartan Doom Guy, and we'll meet a bunch of historical and fictional characters. Being set in ancient Greece while under the rule of Emperor Tiberius, the Romans are taking over, leaving only the Spartans remaining to fight.
No retreat. No surrender. That is Spartan law.
While the Spartans are preparing for war, the Spartan warrior is contacted by Ares, the god of war.
Ares!
I put a whole bag of jelly beans up my ass.
Okay, look, I get it's very similar, but bear with me. From gods to emperors, gladiators, and fellow Spartans, our quest is to stop the Romans and eventually take down Ares, whom tricked us, as we set out on a bloody massacre. Being a hack and slash game, the combat of Spartan Total Warrior is a massive departure from what the original series Total War is used to, as they are an RTS and tactics game. Total Warrior instead focuses on fast pace and visceral combat, and instead of versing 1 or 2, maybe 4 or 5 opponents at once like you would in a God of War, we actually face hundreds. You'll notice each character is also given a name, which I think is a pretty unique touch. Granted, some of them probably repeat and I haven't noticed, but when you're having fun, who cares?
I'd like to go on record as being opposed to the use of violence for purposes of conflict resolution. However,
while the game doesn't have the most complex battle system out there, the Spartan has access to essentially 2 main attacks and a whole bunch of weapons that you'll unlock as you progress, going from basic gear as your sword and shield, while eventually being able to unlock things such as the shield of Medusa, the spear of Achilles, and the blades of Athena. Motherfucker! Spartan Total Warrior keeps things fresh enough as you go through its roughly 14-ish hour long campaign that you won't get too bored. It's also important to note this game is not easy. You will take a lot of damage and you can die very quickly if you're not paying attention to what's going on. You can heal up during levels, but you have to find these statues to pray at, which means unless you've killed everyone around you, you're more prone to taking damage. Also, some of the missions have some pretty annoying failure states, and they can be quite difficult and you might have to redo them a couple of times. Thankfully none of them are too long, so it doesn't really overstay its welcome. Beyond the somewhat straightforward combat, the player will also get access to some magic abilities that are based on the weapons you're using. These are known as Power of the Gods. These definitely can be lifesavers in certain situations as well, and they feel super powerful. We also get access to a rage meter, although it's a little bit different from what you would think. Instead of giving you a power up for a short period of time, instead, once you've built up a combo, you can actually do either an instant kill on a single enemy or kill a bunch of weaker enemies, depending on what attack you choose. And with the amount of enemies that you are going to have to fight at any given time, you're going to need to make full use of all of your abilities and your equipment to be able to make sure you can beat these hordes. Typically, each level you will kill between 100 to 300 enemies, which is just nuts.
That's a lot of nuts!
And really adds to that Doom comparison I made earlier. With the amount of enemies shown on screen, you think the game's visual fidelity would suffer somewhat heavily. This just isn't the case, however, as the game does look pretty damn good. Granted, its color palette's a little too brown for its own good, and it's not a 10 out of 10 looker, especially considering some of the textures are a little low res. What is impressive is the game's animations, especially the lip syncing. Typically when I think of games of this era, they're not particularly well done. However, Spartan Total Warrior absolutely nails it.
That's right. You do realize this is crazy.
The voice acting itself is also pretty solid. It's nothing I'd say that's straight out exceptional, but it's better than decent. The Spartan himself is pretty well designed and is pretty believable for the character he is. His animation and movement speed all feel really tight and responsive, and this shows in the combat. As I've said, it's very visceral and very responsive. So we've established the game is fast paced and very over the top. You would hope the soundtrack would help encapsulate this feeling. For the most part, I would say it does, but with an asterisk. Although very high energy, the soundtrack feels a little too electronic for my tastes. It would have done better to have a little bit more of a focus on the traditional feeling with the instruments for some of the tracks. I don't mind some drum and bass, but when it's all I hear while fighting Romans, it feels more like a rave than Total War. Composed by Jeff Van Dyke, who is known to work on the Total War series and also recently Unpacking, the soundtrack definitely had some pretty capable hands working on it, and it is by no means bad, it is just not to my personal taste. And if I had to level any other complaints about the game, it's more to do with the game's balance, because some fights can feel a little bit unfair with certain enemies being able to just knock you over constantly, especially the giants, or some missions can feel a little bit more difficult than they need to solely because you don't understand what the game truly wants you to do. It's not anything you won't be able to overcome with a bit of perseverance, but do understand you might fail once or twice while you try to understand what the game wants you to do. Also, some of the locations can feel a little bit boring. It's not the most exciting game to look at, and it's because it has that sandy brown look to literally everything.
I don't like sand.
I do wish I had a little bit more color to it, but overall, it's nothing that I would say is offensive to look at. Do understand you're not going to get the nice, interesting backdrops of something like God of War. And I'm not saying more color would have guaranteed more people would have played it, but I think if it was more visually appealing, it would have helped people want to pick it up. Because overall, this game sold less than 500,000 copies, making it quite unknown, which is surprising given how popular Total War is. This could be why we never got more spin-offs of this type from both Sega and Creative Assembly. Normally, I would call for a remake or a remaster of games like this, and as much as I would love to say so in this case, I do have some reservations. If they were to remake it, I would like them to change it just a little bit, add in some new locations, some more color, just make the game look a little bit nicer. I think this combat in a more modern control scheme would be just phenomenal.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
And even if it wasn't to be Spartan Total Warrior, if we got something like Warhammer Total Warrior or Shogun Total Warrior, I think it would be absolutely awesome. Spartan Total Warrior is a game that sadly released at the wrong time. And yes, I know some people can say it's the Wish version of God of War. Yes, it shares a lot of similarities in its lore. Sadly, it's set at a pretty similar time. I think it's dishonest to say it's a ripoff, because it's not. It is its own unique game. It's not going to be the greatest experience in gaming you'll ever have, but it's a game I highly recommend playing at least once. And thankfully, unlike most other retro games, you can get it pretty cheap. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, that brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this look back at a little spin-off of the Total War series in Spartan Total Warrior. If you played it, let me know, because I really love this game. I remember renting it from Blockbuster. Or no, it was Video Easy, sorry, as a kid, and I loved it. So, enough ranting and raving. Stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.